And how do you, this newer generation, navigate that, living between two cultures? What does that mean for you?
I mean, I wrote a whole show about it. My first show, In the Heights, that's really what I was wrestling with. What does it mean? What do you call home when your parents were both born somewhere else? And for some of the characters, that is 2 generations back. From some, it's no generations back. And every character defines home differently. But I've always said the most autobiographical part of that is there's a song called When You're Home, when Nina sings, "When I was younger, I imagined what would happen if my parents had stayed in Puerto Rico. Right. Who would I be if I had never seen Manhattan?" And you're constantly figuring that out. And it's a really highly specific and very personal answer. And it grows exponentially more complicated when you have kids. And you want your kids to have a connection to the island your parents grew up in. You know, we were sent to Vega Alta every summer. And it was, my grandparents didn't speak English, so it was sink or swim, Spanish, and they worked. It wasn't like we were at the beach all day. My grandmother ran Viajes Miranda, a travel agency. Our grandfather was the George Bailey of Vega Alta. He ran the town bank, credit union. And so we knew who was flying where, and we knew all the town gossip, and we knew we needed money. Because we were just bouncing around there all summer, and so we had for real Puerto Rican summers. We were not like in a resort, and I'm really grateful for that, because I go back. We have a really intense connection with our family on the island. I'm curious for you, Miguel, what your answer would be, because you really grew up in the city.
Yeah. I mean, I kind of. Being largely Dominican, I kind of grew up in 3 in a way, especially I feel like in my later years. But me personally, that's not something I've ever thought of much, because for the most part, I just think of me as in the entirety of me. I don't, yes, I will often try to, for lack of better words, categorize certain parts of myself and my identity, but it doesn't change the fact that they make one person. They don't make multiple different people. I'm just me. So, yeah.
But I always say I'm from Queens.
One of the things you talk about in the book, which I found interesting because it's something that, I think about all the time, is when you begin, and we're gonna be all over the place, by the way. Do not expect anything chronological here. This is not gonna make any sense. And we're sober. You talk about starting the Hispanic Federation and diluting. There were some people who did not want you to do that because they thought you were going to dilute Puerto Rican power by making it a larger pan-Hispanic, for lack of a better term, effort. You fought against that. You have been very successful with the Hispanic Federation. It's something I obsess about because I think people who are not Latinos don't understand that there's a lot of people focus on the differences instead of the things that bring us together. They focus on rivalries and competition and stupidity instead of the things that bring us together. So how did you, back then?
Yeah, I didn't choose to be Hispanic or Latino.
That term didn't even exist.
Existed. But this country's obsession and definition and the way in which they saw the country was black and white. And here are a whole bunch of people who come from a whole bunch of places, many who were here and we just conquered their lands. And they needed to call us something. So they call us Hispanic. I remember reading in 1980 the front page of Time magazine, Time Under the Sun. I'm like, whatever that means. But then I realized, espérate, we were Mexican Americans in the Southwest, Cubans in Florida, and Puerto Ricans in New York. So if we are 2 million Puerto Ricans and 2 million Cubans and 15 million Mexicans, they say we're Latinos. So now I am going to go to government and say we're 20 million. And I have much more power when I'm talking on behalf of 20 million than 2 million. So I said, I'm going to use this as my advantage. And as we go along, let's figure out what do we have in common and how do we create that common agenda that then we present to others. And that's what the Hispanic Federation was, that attempt to bring people who come from different countries, different generations, different political situations, and advocate for things that were affecting all of us in the same way.
So what do you do, for example, if there is a Hispanic running that you don't like? Because I get this question all the time, right? Like, what if Marco Rubio becomes the first That wasn't supposed to be funny, guys. What if Marco Rubio becomes the first Latino vice presidential candidate? What does that mean?
Tiny Marco?
Niño, por Dios.
Wow, you're using your least favorite guy's nickname for the guy.
Then
You got it wrong, by the way. Little Marco.
Little Marco, right? Then
We so petty.
then he is. I'm not going to vote for him because at the end of the day, I will have to wait until Trump dies for him to be president. So I'm not going to vote for him, but it doesn't mean that he doesn't advance the concept of Latinidad. Because then there's a whole bunch of people. Just remember, this guy goes on stage and says that our blood gets envenena. How the hell do you say?
Poison.
Poisons the blood of this country. So he would have picked someone with poisonous blood to be his vice presidential candidate. I want MAGA to figure out how they handle that dissonance, that cognitive dissonance.
Well, now that you put it that way. Now, so when I look at you as a family, I admire you so much because I've seen you together in so many different places and so many, I follow you on Instagram. I mean, you made them put on Sound of Music costumes and do like an entire skit.
As they should.
And so
We bitched and moaned, but it was fun.
I mean,
We sang Doe a Deer in Austria all day long.
yeah. How many times have you seen Sound of Music?
140 times.
How many times have you seen Hamilton?
Oh, tons of time. Because remember, I went to Hamilton during rehearsals, so I will see the same scene for 5 hours. So I have plenty of mileage.
Luis always thinks he likes to be behind the scenes, but he's too ADD for behind the scenes. So he's like, I'm going with you to the set of the movie. And 3 takes in, he's like, Coño, do you have it yet? I have real work. I think
you got it. I think you got it.
I gave him a cameo, just like being a psychologist. I gave him a cameo in Tick, Tick, Boom, and it was a complicated shot, and he had to go like this. He played a doorman. He had to go like this in a complicated dancing shot. And after the 5th take, I was getting heckled by the doorman, being like, Papa, I have to go back to work. Do you have it yet?
You gave both of them a cameo in the Heights.
Well, I didn't. John Chu did that.
Oh, it wasn't you?
I didn't direct that.
And on that one, we were filming. You were there. And we had a show to go to on Broadway.
Their cameo in the movie was fucking up their theater tickets.
So I
Nice,
remember,
Lin-Manuel, but we have a matinee.
so I remember going to John Chu and said, we got to go in 40 minutes. We better get this shot. And then Luz didn't know the lyrics.
I thought I could lip sync.